Hi everyone, welcome. We're just gathering. We'll get kicked off in just one moment. All right. Seeing most folks have joined from the waiting room, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much today for joining us for a Marine Technology Society webinar. I'm Abby Wakely, Manager of Member Engagement here at MTS and your moderator for this session. I'm really excited to showcase the impactful initiatives from our MTS member, Blue Robotics. Before we dive in, I want to kick off things with a brief overview of Zoom webinar. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be shared with everyone that is registered. Attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have technical questions for me, please type them in the chat box, which is signified by a double conversation bubble icon. Or if you have questions for the presenters, kindly type them in the Q&A box, which is the conversation bubble icon with a question mark in the center. You can ask these questions anytime during the presentation, and I will pose them to the presenters after they present. Now let's get to why we are here, the webinar. Today I'm really excited to have a team from Blue Robotics, Eliot Sandberg and Tyler Buckingham. They will be discussing open source and ocean tech, what it means to them, and also where it falls short. Eliot is a collaboration-focused mechatronics engineer and software developer managing the forum and leading software documentation at Blue Robotics. He builds information models and bridges understanding between internal teams as well as the broader marine robotics community. Through the lens of community concerns and feedback, he enables applications by helping users discover new possibilities while reimagining interface designs and user experiences. With passions for both nature and humanity, Eliot is driven by combining diverse perspectives and knowledge to explore the unknown. And then we have Tyler, who is a forward-thinking strategist in ocean technology and blue economy initiatives. He leads business development at Blue Robotics to make marine technology more accessible. As the architect behind programs like Blue Steam Ahead, Grow Line, and Bubble Time, he creates partnerships that open new markets in underwater exploration, kelp farming, and education. Drawing on his background with documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, and also as co-founder of Coastal News Today, Tyler blends storytelling and strategy to connect technology with people and their communities. All right, Tyler and Eliot, thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to stop sharing. So Eliot, you can share your screen, and Tyler, you can take it away.
All right, cool. Well, Eliot is pulling up the presentation that he will be giving. I'm going to just tee him up a little bit here. And I'll just start by saying thank you all for being here, and thanks to MTS for hosting us. This is our first webinar, and we're really thrilled to be able to present to this community. And really, that's what this openness discussion is all about. It's about our community of collaborators. And I've been thinking a lot actually about jazz music. And what's interesting about jazz is that every player, you leave the sheet music behind. You get creative. And in order to do that, you have to listen. You have to create a forum of a genre of music, if you will, where everyone listens and creates together. And in many respects, openness is kind of our jazz, if you will. It is the platform, it is our agreement among collaborators to share ideas. And there's a belief that we can, even though we disagree, that we can get to a better answer together. And that is a total community project and the basis of so much of what we do at Blue Robotics. And so with that, I'm super stoked to hand it off to my teammate, Eliot, who's going to talk about Blue Robotics and openness.
All right. Thanks, Tyler, and thanks also to Abby and Larissa and all the people who helped make this webinar and presentation possible. And obviously, thanks to all of you guys for tuning in and everyone listening afterwards. As a quick run through, this presentation is structured into three main parts. So we'll be starting out with a bit of a philosophy around what openness means to us and why it can be valuable. Following that up with a collection of case studies covering software, hardware, and communication, and then rounding that out with some additional ways that you could get involved and some time for questions at the end. So I'd like to start with an analogy that I think is at the heart of the topic. Are we dragons? Dragons are usually considered as big forces of nature, intelligent and powerful maybe, but also known for collecting, resting on, and also fiercely protecting their store of gems and golds, maybe dotted with some skeletons of foolish attempted thieves who've, wanted some of that gold for themselves. Now, protecting hard-fought treasures can seem pretty enticing, so let's assume it's pretty normal instinct to hoard our valuables and recognize that people and organizations who already have valuables may need some convincing before they're willing to share that with others. So, why bother being open? Humans have advanced quite substantially as a species through collaboration, so clearly it's at least useful sometimes to share some of our treasure for communal progress, even if that can invite additional competition. Unlike dragons, if we did everything individually, most of us wouldn't even be able to survive. So it's pretty common for groups of people to pull together their resources and skills. And to improve livelihoods instead of just surviving, that often involves subgroups of people creating businesses to serve other groups of people, wherein individuals are more valuable because of the complementary skills that they offer to a common goal. For a business to support its employees, it needs to continue existing. So in some sense, then, the goal of a business is to succeed. Certainly, one of the short-term ways of succeeding as a business is to somehow prevent others from doing the same thing that you're doing. However, that's still reliant on being able to do something well enough first for others to actually want it. And then if you're relying on a knowledge moat to recline on your riches, then sooner or later there'll be other people doing your thing better than you can. Unlike dragons, we also actively spend some of our valuables on salaries, manufacturing, development, and other things like that. Doing that sustainably requires collecting a matching income, which can then be done by providing enough value for a community to support the business and typically requires continual improvement of the business. Compared to a business, a community is a less formal gathering. It's instead generally focused around shared values and realizing a collection of ideas, like marine science or marine technology, for example. Whether a given business succeeds is less important to a community than whether their offerings are relevant and accessible. I'd consider it the goal of a community to thrive. Community members may be more inclined to fund pursuit than being particularly invested in a specific project, and they also may not care about commercial success. When there's a large enough community that multiple businesses and organizations are contributing to its advancement, we have an industry whose goal can be considered to progress. For that to happen efficiently, it's unhelpful for businesses to be repeating each other's work, and there's potential for more effective advancements and value for everyone involved when businesses are able to debate ideas with each other and also learn from the rest of the industry and the community that they serve while executing on the parts that they are best at and that the community is most in need of. So if we're not dragons and we think sharing may help our industry to progress and our businesses to succeed, how can we approach that? I'd like to qualify that sharing is by no means a binary phenomenon. There are many different aspects of an organization that it can choose to share or keep private, and to differing degrees. There's a brief overview here, which we'll cover aspects of in more depth through the later case studies. If we imagine the industry as an orchestra, continuing Tyler's music ideas, where each organization is an instrument with a unique tone, perhaps, our collective efforts then combine to form melodies. Whether they sound any good depends partly on the individual performances, sure, but also on how we harmonize with and complement each other. With limited resources, we need to choose which areas to prioritize improving, which depends on the current levels, the preferences and values of the community of listeners, and how difficult each component of tone is to improve. Playing well together elevates everyone involved, which is expressed through the resulting trust from the community and clients in our products and services, development and operating efficiencies, meaningful comparisons and differentiation between available options, easy integrations together, products that are accessible to use, maintain, and to repair, and ongoing fun and motivation for us and our clients, as well as a long-lasting impact and legacy of improvements to the industry as a whole. The point of this talk is not to throw stones at anyone in particular or unrealistically expect that every business will be as open as possible in every way. Some of these things do take resources, but we want to highlight that there are some ways to be more open, often with limited resource costs, and they can help us collaborate and thrive more effectively. If we're not dragons, then perhaps the music we make can help to calm the dragons that we encounter along the way. So, starting out in the software space, the first idea that you might jump to is open source. Blue Robotics is somewhat unique in that most of our software is open source, which allows the community to transparently see what changes are taking place over time, as well as make personal modifications for themselves, which they can then turn into contributions to the official versions that we release and distribute more widely. There is definitely some value in those options just being available, especially around community trust and learning, and as a grounding for some of the most technical support requests. We've learned, though, that many users care more about how easily they can understand and use the software for their goals and integrations, and access to the source code is not necessarily the most effective way of accomplishing that. In particular, reading the code is not a substitute for either the overviews and design intent that can be described in good documentation, or for the relevance a well-crafted guide can have to the things that the users are actually trying to accomplish. That's even the case for skilled programmers, let alone users who may not have any programming experience at all. Beyond that, interfacing with software is typically more about the protocols involved than their implementation. So integrators may care more about well-defined protocols than how your software happens to choose to handle things internally. And most importantly, sharing the code doesn't guarantee that your code is actually well-designed for the use cases your users are working on. A pile of something that doesn't do what you want is not very useful for you. So, as some specific examples, when Blue Robotics first started making vehicles, we ran an open source companion software on the onboard computer on the vehicle, which was just enough for the vehicle to operate. For a vehicle that was designed to be modified, though, we ran into issues with integrators not having a framework to actually work together, because for every integration, it had to be made and distributed as a variant of the entire software, which meant that integrating two different devices from separate manufacturers required the user to do programming to combine those variants that the manufacturers had made, or it had to be included in the official version that was distributed to everyone. There was also some robustness issues with the updating system of the software itself that meant updates often failed and required to fix that, it required unsealing and opening the watertight enclosure to flash an SD card, which is not a very pleasant or reliable process for people to need to do. Learning from those problems, we developed a new onboard computer software that was designed around a container system. That allows us to install new updates as a separate container without breaking the working system, and then switching to that new version or older versions as relevant, while also making it substantially easier to support different kinds of onboard computer hardware. So extra bonuses there. We've also designed an extension system that allows developers to provide extensions as containers, which users can then find and readily install multiple of together. So solve that problem too. There's an added bonus that extensions aren't packaged into the core open source project, which opens the door to some potential revenue streams that may not be otherwise available, and also allows external developers to not need to make their code open source to work nicely with our code. In a similar vein, for controlling our vehicles, we started out with a modified version of the control station software QGroundControl. So that provides basic access to the vehicle telemetry and controls, a video stream, and also planning missions. Unfortunately, the software is very reliant on predefined display elements and data sources. So if someone wanted to add an additional video or sensor data stream to the display or communicate with custom services on their vehicle, they would need to either build and distribute a completely custom version of QGroundControl, or they would need to run a separate software at the same time to manage those extra features, which can sometimes have conflicts with QGroundControl. We've since moved our development efforts to our own software, Cockpit, which is designed to be a widget, data, and action manager rather than a specific interface for a specific kind of vehicle. Users are then able to configure their interface how they want to, which means they can freely add, move, and remove widgets, Additional widgets can be imported directly from BlueOS Extensions or defined directly within Cockpit, and the action system allows defining custom functionalities that can be used by widgets or assigned to joystick buttons and the like. The result of this is that most users don't need to modify Cockpit, and those that do have access to some powerful interfaces that allow relatively small contributions and changes to be accessible through several aspects of the software. That said, we're yet to add any kind of online store or repository of widgets and actions like we have with the BlueOS extensions. So while it's possible to share and import them, there are still issues with knowing what external developers have made available or where to go about finding them. So definitely room for us to improve there as well. For a bit of a different example, our vehicles run variants of the ArduPilot autopilot firmware family. So that helps us convert user commands into motor control outputs, as well as reading sensor data to estimate things like the vehicle's orientation and its depth. Different vehicles have individual requirements, but there's also a fair amount of shared functionality. Like most vehicles have a desire to have some sense of whether they're facing in a particular direction so they can move in that direction, or being able to follow waypoints as part of an autonomous mission. While we are technically the maintainers of the ArduSub variant of ArduPilot for underwater ROVs, we also get to benefit from developments made in the Common Core, as well as in the ArduRover variant that's used in surface vehicles, including our boats. There's also been community development to add features like surface tracking, maintaining a sonar detected distance from the seafloor, and the main developer of that contribution has since formed a partnership with the Seattle Aquarium to do some additional development. So working together encourages more working together. In terms of architecture and features, there are some challenges for conveniently supporting some common customizations like custom vehicle frames without needing to set up a full development environment, which we're actively working on enabling through a somewhat recently introduced scripting capability that's available in the autopilot. We also previously maintained an independent documentation site for just the ArduSub firmware, which made it a bit different from the other firmware variants. And I'm in the process of migrating that to join the broader ArduPilot documentation, which should help users to more readily find the information they need, while also allowing improvements that we make to the documentation system to better benefit the ArduPilot community as a whole. It's good to play nice there. All right, let's talk hardware. From the start, Blue Robotics has been about enabling others to focus on solving their own unique problems, rather than everyone spending their resources on independently resolving common issues. The premise then is that we can solve those common issues once, hopefully really well, and manufacture in large enough quantities to benefit from economies of scale that can help us keep prices affordable. To that end, the hardware we design is made to be quite broad in purpose, easy to integrate into other projects or integrate other projects into, and spec'd to cover the main features most people need. So for example, people inspecting a lake or river don't need to pay premiums for equipment that is rated to full ocean depths, which is, different parts of the industry will need to cover that. As some relevant examples, by providing freely available 3D models of our products, we enable custom use cases that we can't readily serve directly. We can't do everything, but we can try and enable our users. That includes things like custom gripper jaws and end effectors, which there have been various designs for shared and discussed by the community. We also try to encourage users and integrators to familiarize themselves with our models with occasional design competitions and try to bolster the sense of community and the impact of community designs by collecting and sharing them in openly available model repositories like printables. 3D models are great for checking if things will physically fit in somewhere, especially if they have complex geometry, but it's often also important for integrations to mechanically attach and/or electrically connect somewhere, in which case there's value in 2D drawings of things like bolt hole spacings and mechanical tolerances, as well as specifications and ideally standards for connectors that are relevant to a given use case. When you've got well-defined interfaces and modular components, it's possible to create all kinds of designs. This is a DIY diver propulsion vehicle that was designed by one of our team members who's an avid diver. And he made that by connecting a couple of thrusters with a battery and some basic control electronics in an enclosure. And then there's a folded sheet metal frame with a collection of 3D printed mounts kind of strapping everything together. That design was shared openly, and we're aware of half a dozen or so that have been since made in the wild with the potential for that to develop into a broader platform of open ideas. There's still more to consider though. After all, drawings, interface standards, and static 3D models don't necessarily tell you the sequences or methods for actually fitting the parts together. So assembly and repair guides, along with documentation of critical internal parts like seals and other interfacing elements, can help support users and integrators to better understand product internals and potentially helps them to investigate or fix broken things without them requiring as much direct individual support. So that reduces our support load by providing more information to our users. Then, like with software, there's the design of the parts themselves. It's great to teach people how to interface with or use something, but you can reduce the resources that are necessary to teach that by making that an easy thing to do in the first place. Just as design for manufacturing is valuable when you want to make something in large quantities, if you want users to integrate with your products, then it's valuable to factor that into your design goals. As an example, our current vehicle design has an electronics tray, which works well for the electronics we sell it with, but it's only compatible with a specific enclosure diameter and length, and it may not be ideal for someone else's electronics or components. We recently released a rail-based internal layout system, which allows mixing and matching a variety of rectangular and circular tray components that can slot into and attach to a set of rails in different positions. Those rails also make it much easier for people to design and manufacture custom trays if the ones that we provide don't meet their requirements, so they can still make use of the benefits of our system without having to use all of our parts. There's a similar story for our enclosure clamps, which we've recently revamped to fit all of our enclosure sizes, with a versatile mounting bolt pattern that allows attaching them to custom frame elements and peripherals, as well as to clamps around other enclosures regardless of their size. So you can see they're all kind of fitting together there. Of course, selling quality products only works if people are actually confident that they know what they're getting when they buy a part, and often well before they commit to buying something. So they can compare available options and make sure they're getting the right product for their application. For us, then, it's important to not only try to make important information about our products readily available, it's also important to help potential customers understand what different kinds of specifications actually mean and why a given value may or may not be relevant to what they're trying to achieve. I'd like to highlight a couple of communication pipelines which we try to employ in tandem to both keep customers informed and help the community to progress to the point where our products become relevant and valuable to them. If we guide them, they start to want to be able to use our things. So to make it easy to compare products, we keep detailed specifications readily available on our website on the product pages. And from an engineering perspective, a product with no specification that it can be held to is effectively a toy. It's generally hit or miss with quality and performance, and it's both difficult and frustrating to try to design around from very personal experience. Public pricing saves everybody time on quote inquiries when someone is trying to determine whether one of our products fits in their budget and is worth considering for their application, and also helps it stay practical for us to manufacture a broad range of products at scale and with global distribution. Further, when searching for products as part of an engineering development process, looking at individual product pages can be painful when all you need are key specifications. We provide a technical reference with those and also provide some public collections of specs and pricing of products across the industry so that it's easier for engineers and designers to compare our products with alternatives and also to consider products that may be relevant to use together with ours or could be integrated into our vehicles. Those kinds of comparisons are great for people who already have knowledge of the relevant fields and parameters, but to help newcomers to reach that point, we also provide a breadth of guides and resources, including a curriculum for schools as part of our Blue Steam Ahead initiative, and a collection of relevant academic research and papers in the Subsea Scholar section of our website. The future of marine technology and ocean exploration lies in both highlighting the current frontier so that people can advance it, as well as in motivating and guiding future generations into our communities and industry. For those actively involved in designing, we provide a collection of design tools to help with the process, while also supporting competitions with team guidance and prizes to keep people having positive experiences and wanting to stay involved. As a convenient aside to that, we recently had an intern who was previously a mate ROV competitor. So that kind of community support and engagement is directly beneficial to us as a business and company, not just through building up our potential customer base. Looping back, we also hook ourselves into industry developments and expectations, as well as product feedback through our community forum and the feedback options on our website. A forum for searchable discussion also allows for communal support and investigation while encouraging the development of new complex ideas and projects to occur in a space where we can directly provide support and guidance, including directing people to relevant resources, both of ours and of others that they may not be aware of. I like to consider support requests as kind of the basis of documentation. So our product pages feature dedicated sections for frequently asked questions and also relevant forum posts. And topics that can benefit from more detailed write-ups and references are included in our software and code library documentation, as well as the various guides that I've mentioned previously. Of course, some support requests can be avoided entirely by designing products that are intuitive and well-suited to the community's needs, as well as distributing products with the kind of local expertise, modifications, and complementary products that are provided by our global distributor network, who also provide invaluable feedback about which aspects of our product experiences should be improved. There are also community members who require more complete solutions to their problems than we're able to provide, and we try to meet their needs by highlighting available marine technology service providers around the world, who may then be our customers or distributors or people who are not using our things at all. Bringing everything together, here's a final example of an ongoing openness journey with one of our products. To start with, our Ping Sonar Echo Sounder was developed as a collaboration and first released with a closed firmware, but an open protocol for interfacing with. We provide open source libraries for popular programming language that allow using that protocol, along with the Ping Viewer software that can control and record readings from it with a visual interface. Because the protocol is open, Cerulean Sonar View software can also be used with our device and some of their own, and it's available as a BlueOS extension with its interface accessible in Cockpit through an iframe. So we didn't even have to implement that, they did that. Throughout that time, we've also released a variety of guides for integration with different hardware and into different vehicles, specific use cases, and some common troubleshooting and repair steps if something goes wrong. We've had various forum requests over the years of people wanting to access to output types that weren't readily available or different ways to control the device, including for repurposing the device entirely as an acoustic beacon or modem, or testing custom filtering algorithms for the distance estimation, or for trying to estimate materials and things like that. So we've recently released a bare bones open firmware that people can readily modify and build custom versions of, which is now partly being held back by the lack of relevant message specifications in the protocol that we started with. So we're now looking to revise and extend the protocol. It'll be exciting to see where things go from here. There are limits to our development resources, but providing a platform for others to begin to explore sonar development is something we've wanted to do for a really long time. We're hoping that this is an early step to opening up more accessible capabilities for the whole community, while also making our product more versatile and valuable in the process. Together, there's a lot that we can achieve. So, you've heard about dragons and how to surpass them. Will you join the symphony? You might be like us and employ similar tactics, but there's also plenty of scope for openness outside of what was covered in this talk, and you could lead the way for us to follow in areas that we haven't considered. If you'd like some more tips around being open as effectively as possible, information that you share should be findable so that people can get to it, searchable so people can find the parts that are most important to their needs, accessible so a broad audience can get value from it, understandable so key information can be extracted easily, as well as context linked so that newcomers can know where to find fundamentals that they're missing and advanced audience members can continue further exploration. I'll now hand back off to Tyler for some closing remarks.
Awesome. Eliot, that was great. We are stoked to take questions here, and I'm going to hold any closing remarks until after that. So let's dive into our questions.
Thanks, Eliot. Thanks, Tyler. If anybody has any questions, please type them in the Q&A box, which is the question bubble with a question mark in the center. And so I just want to Thank you guys so much for this presentation. It reminded me of a quote from Leslie Knope, Parks and Rec, huge fan. No one achieves anything alone. And I think it's a really powerful ethos for a company. And so really thank you so much for sharing your information. And we have a lot of questions coming in. So folks, please type in your questions and we'll pass them off to Eliot and Tyler. So the first question that came in is in regards to Blue ROVs and modifications. So if a user has customized their ROV and wants to share their modifications or connect with others who are doing similar work, what are the mechanisms or opportunities for collaborating together and sharing lessons learned?
I guess as an initial idea there, the forums that we have a dedicated section for adventure logs for people doing their own dives, as well as for modifications of our vehicles and for builds of custom vehicles. So we would very happily recommend that people, share things they've been up to designing and developing on our forums. There are also other open forums available and social media and the like. We do quite regularly, like our social media is often more highlighting other people's cool stuff than our own. So if we're aware of something cool that you've done, then we're potentially open to expanding the audience that is, made aware of that. But we have to find out about it somehow as well. So sharing it with us through our forums and opening that up to community discussion is, I think, a really good way of doing that.
Thanks, Eliot. And then another question came in on modifications from Christoph. How do you handle performance and safety guarantees and warranties? Who is liable if something goes wrong with a modified open design?
That's an interesting question. I sure hope it's not us. I mean, that would be that wouldn't be good. I mean,
I feel
yeah, it's
we
a good
can
lawyer
only
question.
meaningfully guarantee the things that we have designed and tested, right? So we can try to provide guidance on whether we expect something will work if someone makes a particular modification, or if we have, so for example, our ROV comes in two variants. There's like a standard and a heavy, and there's like then a kit that you can use to upgrade it. So that modification is, I guess, officially tested and endorsed by us. But in terms of safety considerations, I think that's something that would be like, if you have engineering expertise on your team, then that would be people that are hopefully looking into those things. But also the community is very open to discussing ideas. And if someone's saying, hey, I'm trying to do this, is this safe? What could go wrong? Then there's usually pretty active discussion around, oh, okay, be wary of these aspects. Don't do this if, this particular bit, if you're not trained in it, especially around high voltage management and things like that. So yeah, engaging with the community there is, I think, another valuable resource that you have at hand.
Thanks,
I
Eliot.
agree. And I think that that's, just to, when you're working in a frontier kind of space, I think it is best to be open and collaborative with the community. For example, there's safety considerations, there's liability considerations, there's engineering considerations, there's also legal considerations about like where you operate, where you test. So forums and communicating, particularly with groups like MTS, can be really helpful there.
Thank you both. And so we've actually had several questions come in about your open source approach. So I'm going to try to summarize them in one and then ask a few follow-ups. So kind of the main broader question focuses on sustainability. If so much of your information is open, how do you sustain the business? How do you generate revenue and continue funding those updates?
I think the main area there is that, like, the ways that we are open, and this goes back to the sort of starting point, the ways that we are open encourage other people to find value and benefit from the things that we make. So we are fundamentally like creating hardware that is useful to people, and we are reasonably good at designing and doing that. But also we are tapped into the community to find out ways that we should be expanding that. So like if you share everything that you're capable of, well, everything that you're thinking about, then there can be concerns with someone else does, your next great idea first. But if like there are many problems that are yet to be solved, and if you have engineering work that is happening on those problems, then you can potentially be the people to solve that, then other people don't need to solve that problem anymore if you do it really well. So I guess that's the way that we have primarily operated so far. We are looking into different ways that we could potentially make money from different areas of software, but we think fundamentally that the software that lets our vehicles run as a sort of basic way is something that we like to have open and readily available to be monitored and adjusted by people. So if we wanted to monetize our own software, then that's something that we could provide, like an additional report generation software or something that is extra value on top of what a base user of the vehicle would want, as well as enabling other people to provide for sale software components potentially through our systems that we can then help distribute. Tyler, I'm not sure if you have any more thoughts on that side.
I really do. So first of all, Blue Robotics, we have a humble theory of the case. And that is that we believe in incremental improvements to modular components that are the building blocks for more complex ideas. These are the individual instruments, if you will, of our jazz ensemble. And so we are trying to create an ecosystem. And we want to a thriving, as Eliot, the word you used earlier, we seek a thriving ecosystem where fish and all sorts of biodiversity come in and make their homes in our kelp forest. And so on the contrary to it being like a concern of ours that openness being a concern, it's on the contrary, it's of tremendous benefit because it creates a whole sub ecosystem in the same way that a kelp plant or a kelp forest is itself an amazing thing, but it's all of the life around it that it is helping to sustain. And that's what we hope to do with all of these components that are reliable, that we are always improving in the margins all the time. Our theory of the case is that when you take all these things and put them together in a free and open and creative way, you can make something really special that helps democratize marine technology. Next question.
I got one to follow up, and Eliot, I think you answered. This is from Leverett. Do you intend to monetize the software ever? And I believe you said no, because he's curious if you see the software as an enabler of selling the hardware.
The software is definitely an enabler of selling the hardware, but at the same time, the community that is helping us develop the software is an enabler of that software, right? So like the core software that is running our vehicles and the interfaces to most of our devices is something that like we don't feel like there is a need to monetize because we get much more value out of it being an openly available thing that we contribute to and that others can contribute to as well.
Thanks, Eliot. And then another question more broadly about open source and kind of in the research development space. How has your commitment to openness and transparency helped drive ROV innovation?
I think that's like quite dependent on how much understanding there is of the history of ROV development. Like there were definitely capable ROV systems before Blue Robotics came along, but also many of them were very expensive and quite bespoke. So I think our commitment to openness, as well as building on some of the existing open projects that came before us, has helped us to kind of kickstart that into being a more powerful and larger part of the ecosystem of ROVs. And that's then like valuable to us and hopefully valuable to the other people who are using ROV like vehicles that are now more capable as a result of the integration with the ArduPilot firmware family, but also having hardware that they can test with, that they can do software modifications on and test advanced functionalities. These things kind of go hand in hand. If you don't have the hardware, you can't meaningfully test advanced software things. And if you have very basic software, then as good as your hardware is, you can't do very much with it. So having that kind of cycle of development that's feeding into itself is really important there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that creating kind of the open platform where your focus does not need to be on the whole system. Your focus can be on your specific, a hydrophone or a sensor of some type. And that is a type of freedom in marine technology or in technology development generally, but being able to plug in to an open source platform is a capacity builder if your focus is on some sort of sensor system that is going to play into that ecosystem.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Eliot. So a question came in about hardware challenges, and Eliot, you kind of alluded to this, but Bo is curious, what are your leading hardware challenges or improvements you are pursuing in research and development?
I think as organizations grow, there become kind of progressive issues that need to be solved around supplier quality and things like that. Like the quality of the products that Blue Robotics started out with and the team that Blue Robotics started out with has grown substantially. And we have like a page on our website that's just trying to explain how we approach making quality products. In terms of developing new things, challenges for us are around making sure that the things we develop are actually in a space where they're going to be valuable to people, but also doing so in an affordable way. Like we don't want to be making products that are going to be so niche that we can't get the value out of developing them. And as a result, having to make them really expensive. So we like to try to focus our new product developments on a sort of open ocean philosophy where if there is an open space that we can see, hey, we can jump in there, apply our resources to that and make something that there is a definite need for, but that other people are not readily providing, then we'll focus on that. And I think there's like the marine technology industry is still relatively young in terms of compare it to consumer drones in the air, for example. Like there is a lot that is still yet to be done. It's not just everyone's fighting for the scraps at the bottom of the heap, right? So like there are many problems that we would love to solve that we just have no time to work on yet for probably the next, 15 years or something, just because there's so many other interesting things that we want to work on first. So I think choosing which thing to work on is one of our biggest problems. And then, as mentioned before, making sure that as we grow and our customers grow with us and the community grows around that, we maintain levels of quality from ourselves and from our suppliers feeding into us, that is kind of suitable and usable by our customer base.
That makes a lot of sense.
That was well said, Eliot. And I would just add to it that and you led off with this, Eliot, but the idea of accessibility is, I think, kind of forefront. And as our community changes, and what I mean by that is within the MTS community, I mean, if we go to a trade show or a conference and you look around at technology on the floor, you will, over the past 10 years, you would have seen a dramatic transformation in what's out there. And with that transformation, it includes a change in the way the communities are using these technologies. There's huge blue ocean markets, but the common thread here is accessibility. We want to make sure that tools can get in the hands of the user themselves. And it's a challenge in marine technology to make accessible tools, but that is the passion of our research and development team.
Thanks so much, Tyler. And this is a good prelude into the next question on some use cases. We had somebody who's interested of hearing examples of how your open source technologies are being used in education and community engagement.
Can you say that once more?
What are some examples of how your open source technologies are being used in education and community engagement?
Well, let's just start off with curriculum, which is available free, and we would love for any interested educators out there listening, or anyone connected to interested educators, to check it out. And if they're interested in implementing that, let me know, or let us know at Blue Robotics. We'd love to hear that. But I mean, what's cool about Blue Robotics stuff is that it is all, like Eliot showed in the slide, we might even have it up with the trays. You know, so many mate ROV competition teams, for example, are building their totally custom, one-of-a-kind creations with some Blue Robotics components, but then are going in and 3D printing and designing their own specialty pieces to make their thing work. And that's, you know, that's both in the hardware space and in the software space. And Eliot, I've stalled for a few moments. Do you have any additional thoughts to add?
I think like there is definitely room to expand how much the like open software and hardware that we have is used in the education space. Like the Blue Steam Ahead initiative that Tyler was talking about is something that we've relatively recently started, and we'd love that to become a larger thing that more people are involved with. But I think fundamentally having something that is open invites people to be involved. And that applies for companies doing research and development, but that also equally applies to people who want to find out what's this marine technology stuff all about. So there's also an interest there in the self-education space. If someone wants to know something, then they have at least a reference system they can look at and be like, how did these guys do it? That doesn't mean that's a system they're going to be using themselves. It might be if they decide that it's, you know, what they want to use and meets their needs. But even just the existence of I can look at that and find out how it works and tinker with it and play with it means that we're kind of growing the minds and expertise of people who want to be in the industry. And if they don't have that accessible layer, then it's quite possible that many of them would get kind of turned away from the industry because it's just like, oh, it's impenetrable. I can't even get my foot in the door. So like directly measuring that, I think, is understandably difficult. There are, you know, indicators like at competitions, seeing if our parts or software are being used, or having people ask questions on our forums that, you know, are clearly they are in a very early learning stage of what this is all about. But yeah, I think this is something that we'd be interested in expanding more. But the groundwork is there for people to have, you know, the starts of an education in this space.
And I just want to jump in quickly and say, again, you know, this openness concept is a two-way thing. And we could stick our curriculum on our website, and if it's not searchable, and if it's not findable, and if we are not going out to meet people who might want to do this, or might not even know about marine technology at all, but have an interest in teaching marine science and using modern technology to spark curiosity in students, we might need to go and make our curriculum and marine technology even more accessible, because that is a different type of user. That is a less technically sometimes user. So how do we make marine technology accessible to those teachers as well? And so you got to be extra open. You actually have to go out. You have to go out and be like, hey, do you want to be open on this? And but it's really important to do that. We see the blue, I like to think about the blue economy as a user spectrum, which is a little bit different than the way I think we oftentimes think about the blue economy. as a spectrum of like a sector spectrum. I like to think of a spectrum of users, and on the far left side of that spectrum is students. And a lot of those students are not students and teachers and educators. They're not technically inclined people. They're not the sort of people that would come to an MTS webinar, at least not yet. And if we can go out and do some outbound and kind of open our door to them, I think we can bring them in.
Thanks, Tyler and Elliot. That makes a lot of sense. And then I had a question. We have Joe on here who actually works with local high schools kids to develop their own ROV, and they're interested in using your thrusters and controllers for their projects. Are there opportunities for discounts or scholarships to purchase this equipment or to connect with others who are using it?
We do have an education discount. I don't remember how to access it, but that's definitely possible through talking to our sales team, which you can do through our website. Tyler, I'm not sure if you remember what the pathway
I don't want to
is
get
for
it wrong on here, but we
Okay.
do have a discount code for education, and we will furnish that to everybody.
Yeah, I do want to add that, like, monetary aspects there are relevant and valuable to people starting there, but also I think the community aspect there is really important. Like being able to ponder, what does this do? Does it work the way I think it does? Like our forum is not closed off to people with simple, basic beginner questions, right? We want to make sure that those questions are being answered as well. And then also, as I'd spoken earlier in the presentation, we have a variety of introductory guides that help to introduce things like our thrusters and thruster commander, for example, for how to wire those up, even for somebody who hasn't done any wiring of something before. So the hope is that those things are accessible. And then if they're not, that's feedback that we want to hear so that we can improve for everybody's sake.
Amazing. Thanks, Elliot and Tyler. And I got some information. You guys offer a 15% educational discount code, and the code is support STEM. So thank you, Eliza, for sending that. And then Tyler, building on your USM spectrum, Philip had a question. Are you ever considering going into the consumer market?
I consider us in the consumer market, Philip. I think we play both sides of that fence, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, I think I like to envision a future blue economy where basically anyone who wishes to access marine technology has a pathway, an accessible pathway to them. And that's a pretty radical transformation in, arguably the most inaccessible of all technology spaces. Maybe some other niche of technology that I'm not familiar with, but I mean, what's cool right now is that if you take a modular approach and you can bring the cost of these pieces down, we can make accessible ocean technology for everyone. And I think that's the big goal. Now, by no means does that mean that we think that Blue Robotics will be the only person in the space, the only entity. No, not at all. There's tremendous opportunity all over the place, and we make the pieces, we make the Legos. Incumbent on the broad blue economy community to design the specific tools, the specific technology that will fit into the hands of all of those blue economy users out there.
Thanks so much, Tyler. That makes a lot of sense. And seeing that we have 5 minutes left, that was one of our last questions. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to provide some closing remarks. And I also want to thank you all so much for this webinar, and the conversation is not stopping here. We invite anyone who attended this to ask their questions on the Blue Robotics Forum. Eliot, thanks for pulling up that QR code. I'm also going to share it in the chat. If you have questions that we did not answer today, please go to that forum. Eliot will be viewing it, and we'll be posting the recording there. We ask you guys to actively engage. And so Eliot and Tyler, I'll pass it on to you to say a few words.
I'll back clean up, Eliot. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't know. I think just, thankful that we have the opportunity to present this and talk to, a bunch of people that we don't necessarily talk to super frequently. I know I don't do presentations very often, and I'm not sure how many of you are active on our forums already, but hopefully more after today. But yeah, thanks for listening. Hopefully you have some more ideas around how you could potentially work on areas that you are interested in being more open in, and possibly have, found some areas that you weren't aware of that you are now maybe interested in. But other than that, Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just echo Eliot's thanks to everyone for attending today. And Eliot, you crushed it. And Abby, thank you so much. And thanks to the Marine Technology Society. Our door at Blue Robotics, there's only one way to have your door if you're giving a presentation on openness, and that is open. So our doors are open. Reach out if you have any ideas or you want to chat about any of this stuff. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Eliot. And the link to the forum is in the chat. Everyone that's registered will get a copy of the recording, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. And thank you to Blue Robotics for such a fascinating webinar rooted in storytelling. I really appreciated it.
Thanks again, Abby.
Thanks all. Have a good one. Bye.